In this Excel lesson, we're going to look at date formula in Excel. Dates are arguably one of the most important aspects of Excel to understand because they're used almost in every scenario of reporting. There's a lot of different ways we can use and manipulate formula to our advantage in Excel. This can end up saving you a lot of time and struggle because if you understand how to use dates in a variety of ways in Excel, you can develop several shortcuts. Let's take a look at some of the date tips and shortcuts in Microsoft Excel. First, if you want to portray multiple dates in a sequence within a column or a row, all you need to do is start typing a few in sequence, then highlight them, and then drag the corner to where you want the sequence to stop. This can be done for numbers, dates, or other sequences in Excel like months. Let's try this for the three columns we see here for period, date, and month. Let's delete the contents past row 12 and then highlight a few of them and then drag them down, and let's see what happens. You can also achieve this if you had the data presented horizontally in columns and you had selected a few and then dragged them across. As you can see, this is a very useful shortcut. It'll save you time if you just select a sequence of data and drag them either up or down. That way you don't have to manually type in data into all of these cells. That can be especially useful if you're working with a large data set. Tip number 2 is to find the number of days between two dates by subtracting one date cell from another date cell. For example, in cell H17, we subtract cell G16 from G17 to find out that there are 28 days between the two dates. So now you know, if you didn't already know, that you can subtract two dates in Microsoft Excel to find the number of days between them. Tip number 3 is inserting today's date easily using the formula today and then open parentheses and closed parentheses. This is valuable if you always want a cell to contain the most current date as today's date. This can be useful as a reference rather than hard coding a date. As you can see in cell G18, today's date as I'm preparing this video is February 8th, 2020. Tip number 4, let's learn how to use the Countif formula with dates. The Countif formula, as the name suggests, helps us count the number of items in a range if it meets certain criteria which you can set manually. The Countif formula can be used with dates as well. Let's say you want to count the number of dates in a list which are more recent than, let's say, January 1st, 2019. In that case, we would use the Countif formula to reference the list and use the greater than symbol to determine if the dates are greater than the reference date, i.e. cell D21, which is January 1st, 2019. In this case, the result is that there are 3 dates greater than January 1, 2019 in the table. Notice that when you're using the COUNTIF or COUNTIFS formula in Excel, you should be wrapping the greater than or less than signs in quotations and then also using the ampersand symbol to connect it to the criteria. Cell D19 shows the formula breakdown of what I'm referring to. The formula uses COUNTIF and then open parentheses and then the reference table and then quotations with the greater than or less than symbol and then the ampersand symbol and then the reference cell. While tip number 4 helped us understand how to count the number of dates greater than or less than a specific date, tip number 5 is going to teach us how to count the items using the dates and multiple criteria. So the COUNTIF formula used one criteria, and the COUNTIFS formula, i.e. plural, is going to use multiple criteria. In this example, we count the number of dates that are less than April 1st, 2019, and greater than January 1st, 2019, i.e. using multiple criteria this time. As you can see, the result is 2. And by the way, again, we are using quotations around the greater than or less than signs and using the ampersand symbol as well to connect. I mentioned this a few times because it's extremely important that you remember it. The formula won't work without it, and you'll run into formula errors and not know how to properly write the formula using the Countif or COUNTIFS formula if you don't remember how to use the quotation marks around the greater than or less than symbol, as well as subsequently using the ampersand symbol each time. So overall, the lesson here is that you should use the COUNTIF for singular if you want to set one condition when doing a lookup using the date formula in Excel. On the other hand, you should use the COUNTIFS, i.e. plural, formula if you want to set multiple conditions for a lookup and use the date in a table. Makes sense, right? Use plural if you want to set more than one condition. Let's move on to tip number 6. Tip number 6 is very similar to tip number 5. The COUNTIFS formula is used again here, but instead of just using the greater than or less than signs to count the number of dates within a range, we added in the equal sign. If you want to find something greater than or equal to in an Excel formula, just put the two beside each other when writing the formula. In cell H26, we are looking for dates greater than or equal to January 1st, 2019 and less than April 1, 2019. So as you can see in the formula, we're using a greater than, but also we're putting in that equal sign so that it's greater than or equal to. Let's now look at the Sum Ifs formula using dates. There are 3 components to the Sum Ifs formula. The first part is to reference the data to be summed. The second part is the reference table itself. And the third part is the criteria. Let's look at an example. Let's say we want to calculate the sum of the items greater than a particular date, for example, January 1st, 2019, in the table above. We calculate this in cell H27. The formula is written as follows. We use the Sum Ifs and then the reference range of E21 to E24, which is the column data to be summed. And then we reference cells D21 to D24, which is the reference table date range. And then we set the criteria, which is greater than cell D21, i.e. January 1st, 2019. Once again, remember to use the quotations around the greater than sign and use the ampersand symbol after that. The result in this case is 9, which is the sum of 2, 3, and 4 in column E. Tip number 6. Tip number 6 is similar to tip number 5, except we added in the equal sign again. So just remember, if you want to perform a lookup argument such that you're trying to find the value greater than or equal to a reference like a date or a number, you just need to put that equal sign next to the greater than or less than sign in your formula as shown here in cell D26. Let's go ahead and open up cell H26 using the formula shortcut F2 button when we click on that cell. That's right, when you click on a cell and you press the F2 button on your keyboard, it'll actually pop open the formula, which is a quick shortcut. As we can see here, we used the greater than or equal to sign in the formula. Tip number 7 is about integrating the Sum Ifs formula with dates. We previously looked at the Countif and COUNTIFS formula. The Sum Ifs will add the items in a range which meet certain criteria. The Sum Ifs formula can be used with dates as the criteria. Cell D27 shows the formula syntax. The formula is written as sum ifs and then open parentheses, and then you put in the reference table that you want to sum. Then you can apply the greater than or less than symbol and then use the ampersand symbol and then the reference cell. Let's look at an example. Let's use the Sum Ifs formula to calculate the sum of dates greater than January 1st, 2019, which are in column E of the table above. In column H27, we perform the calculation. Let's navigate to cell H27 and review the formula. The formula shows that we're taking the sum of the numbers in column E21 through E24, but only if the cells in D21 and D24 are greater than D21, which is January 1st, 2019. So we're looking in that range of cells D21 through D24, and we're only taking the sum of the ones which are greater than cell D21, which is that date again, January 1st, 2019. Tip number 8. Tip number 8 is actually similar to tip number 7, but it just shows that we can have multiple conditions in a Sum Ifs formula. For instance, if we want to calculate the sum of amounts in column E from rows 21 through 24, which have a date in column D greater than January 1st, let's say 2019, but less than April 1st, 2019, we would write it as shown in cell H28. Let's open up H28 by pressing the F2 cell on it. As you can see, the first part of the formula is the sum range, right? So what do we want to sum? And the second part is the criteria 1 range. So criteria 1 range is the date column associated with the first criteria that we're setting. And remember, we're setting 2 criteria here. Then we can indicate the criteria 1 in the formula, which is the fact that we only want to consider items that are greater than cell D21, which is January 1st, 2019, right? So again, we want to sum items that are greater than January 1st, 2019 for the first condition. Note again that the greater than sign is wrapped in the quotations, and then we use the ampersand symbol. Next, we have the option of adding another criteria, multiple criteria. And we're going to do that similarly to the way in which we did it for criteria 1. So the way we do that is by only considering items that are less than April 1, 2019, which is cell D24. And we write it very similar between, criteria 1 and criteria 2. We're just adding another condition to the formula. So now you know how to use the COUNTIF, the COUNTIFS plural, and the Sum Ifs plural formula in Excel while you're using the date references, which is very important because most of the times when you do an analysis, you want to break things up into date ranges when you do your analysis. And I'm often, these are my 2 favorite formula, I would say, COUNTIFS and the Sum Ifs formula. I'm often using these in my financial planning and analysis. Let's move on to tip number 9, using the if statement. The if statement can be used with dates to determine whether one date is greater than another date. And if the value is, if that's true, if that argument's true, then you can tell the formula to return a specific result. This may seem like an elementary formula, but it's often used in financial modeling. For instance, let's say that you have a table with date headers ranging from January 1st, 2018 to, let's say, January 1st, 2020. And let's say it's organized by months. If you have a table with contract close dates on the left side, it would be helpful to determine whether the close date is in the reference cell. In the table shown on screen here, I've shown an example for a small subset of data. In this example, we are trying to count the number of live contracts in the table and show a 1 if it's live and a 0 if it's inactive. As you can see, we have one new contract per month starting with January and ending in April 2018. This is reflected in the table with a 0 and 1. That is, 1 is active and 0 is inactive. Let's review the formula we used in cell E34. The formula shows that it's equal to if, open parentheses, D34, i.e. the contract date, is less than E33, i.e. the month-end date, then return a value 1. That is, if the contract closed before the current month-end, then portray it as 1, i.e. active. Otherwise, put 0, which we're referring to as being inactive. Note also that in this formula, we put a $sign in front of the D so that when we drag the formula across, the column doesn't change with contract dates. Similarly, we locked the 33 for E33 in the formula so that the row is locked for the date headers being referenced. So another key takeaway here is that if you use the $sign in a formula before a letter, it'll lock that column. And if you put the $sign before the number of a cell reference, it'll actually lock the row. And if you put a $sign in front of both, it'll lock both the row and the column. And that's useful when you're dragging formula or copying formula throughout different cells in a workbook. Let's take a look at tip 10, which uses the EO month formula. This formula is used to return the date associated with the end of any given month you'd like. So let's say you have a worksheet filled with dates and you want to show random and they show random dates throughout the months, but you want to convert them to reflect the end of the month, i.e. January 31st or February 28th. So let's say you've got, dates January 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, February 1st, but you want to portray all of that with the relevant month and date, so January 31st, or if it's, any date in February, you want to portray it as February 28th. The EO month formula will be able to help you achieve this. The first part of the formula syntax is used for the reference cell containing the date that you want to convert. In this case, in our example, the reference cell is D44, which is January 1st, 2019. The next part of the syntax is a counter. So if you want to just show the month-end date associated with the same month of the reference cell, in this case January, then you'd actually just put 0 because you're not trying to skip ahead or behind any months. But if you want to reference 1 month ahead, then in the EO month formula, you'd actually put a 1. You didn't put 1. And if you want to reference, let's say, 1 month prior, then as you can imagine, you just put -1. Similarly, if you want to skip ahead a couple months, let's say 2 months, you would put a 2. Let's look at some examples in the table shown on screen here. Here in the table, we have 5 columns set up with several date examples and results. The first column is the reference date. This is also considered, for the purpose of this example, to be the raw data that you would want to modify. The next column is where we are changing the date to reflect the end of the current month. So we're using the EO month formula, end of month formula. How do we do this? Again, we're using that end of month formula and in the syntax, we input the cell that is the reference date, and then we put in the number of months that we want to skip ahead or back. And so for this one, we're going to choose 0 because we don't want to skip ahead. we just want to input the end of month date. As you can see here, we are able to return January 31st, 2019, and then February 28th, 2019, March 31st, 2019, and April 30th, 2019, which are all in the same month of the reference date, but we're just reflecting the end of month date for those months. The next column is for writing the formula to reflect the end of month plus 1 month. For instance, the first reference date is January 1st, 2019 in cell D44. We can use EO month and then the reference cell and then 1 in order for it to show February 28th, 2019. So previously we were just looking at finding the end of month of the current month and we use 0. In this case, we want to skip ahead a month, and so when writing the formula, we're putting in a 1. Similarly, in the next column, we can enter -1 as the month to show 1 month prior, i.e., for the first example, we're going to change it to December 31st, 2018. In the far right column H, we want to find the end of month plus 2 months. So we input 2 in the month part of the formula syntax. In the first example, we're using January 1, 2019 as the reference cell, and 2 end of months later would be March 31st, 2019, as presented in row 44. Now, if you work in FP&A, so financial planning and analysis, or you do a lot of financial modeling, I actually think you'll end up using this formula EO month quite frequently, particularly because it's so simplistic to write. For instance, let's say you want to portray 12 months worth of dates across a top header row. All you would need to do is type 1 month and then write the formula for the EO month. Use 1 in the formula, as we have done in cell E49, to get the next month, which is, in this case, February 28th, 2019. And then if we want March 31st, 2019, and so on to appear in the cell to the right to it, we would just copy the formula over to the right and continue copying it over to the right so that it keeps showing subsequent months. Moving on to tip number 11 is all about quarter end date references. In this formula, I'm going to show you how to turn any date into a quarter end reference. This is useful if you want to summarize the date for presentation purposes into fiscal quarters. The formula to do this is in cell D51, and it converts a calendar date into a fiscal quarter. The way it works is it puts the letter Q in front of the fiscal quarter number, i.e. Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and then it references the year. Let's look at the formula in action in the below table on the screen here. In this table, we have sample dates from January through July of 2011. To turn these dates into quarter end references, we use the formula in cell D51 and paste it into cell E57 beside the reference sample date that we want to convert into a quarter end date as a reference. We can then drag the formula down so that we can convert the whole table. Note that we made the formula's reference cell to be the same dates in column D. January through March appear as Q1 2011. April through June now appear as Q2 2011. And July appears as Q3 2011. So we can tell that the formula is working properly. And again, I suggest not trying to memorize this whole formula, but if you really need to use this, I would suggest just having this workbook handy. Next time you need to go and make this formula and apply it to your workbook, just open this workbook that's saved on your computer, grab this formula, copy it into your workbook, and apply it accordingly so that you can start to translate your data into a quarter and summarized format. Tip number 12 is a financial modeling tip. Let's say that you're creating a model and you have a list of recurring expenses budgeted in a tab. Let's say some are payable monthly, others are quarterly, and some are annually. Well, what you should do is mark beside each of them the payment frequency, as we've done here. Then, in an assumptions tab, you should have this layout that says payment frequency and the number of payments per period, i.e. 1 for monthly, 3 for quarterly, 12 for annually. What this does is it allows you to then do a lookup against this table in the financial model that you're working on and return the payments number per period so that you can project out costs for the year. This is just a useful tip on how you want to start thinking about modeling data. Everything's got to come back to numbers, and translating words to numbers is really the key. And so that's what we've done here. We've translated, payment frequency, monthly, quarterly, and annually into actual numbers and created a table upon which we can later reference in our financial modeling through a VLOOKUP or other type of index so that we can start to apply formula. Tips 13 through 15 are here to show you how to strip out days, months, and years from a date in Excel. For instance, let's say that you want to just return the day of a date cell. Well, in that case, you would just use the day formula shown in column D here. Similarly, you can use this month and year formula to strip out the month and year from a day. In column F, we have an example date that we want to strip data from, and in column G, we have the data stripped, i.e. 31 for day, 1 for month of January, and 2019 for the year. This is useful if you're working with large pools of data and want to strip out part of it in a column. And you can do that with these formula and then just copy down the formula beside the table that you're working on to strip all of them out at once. You might want to have, a column for day, a column for month, a column for year, each of which are stripping data from a reference cell. Tips 16 through 19 show us how to extract text from a date cell rather than just the number. For instance, tip 16 shows that you can extract the day text by using the formula text and then open parentheses, putting in the reference cell, and then putting quotations around the letters DD, DD. Similarly, per tip 17, you can actually extract the month using MM, or if you just want the number of months, you can put MM. Another cool feature is using MMM, so 3 M's, which will give you the abbreviated version of the text. For instance, JAN, Jan, for January. In tip 20, we can use the YY for returning the abbreviated version of 2019 and just show the last 2 digits, i.e. 19. Finally, in tip 21, you can see that we use YYYY to return the full 2019 number for the year 2019. Now, there may be a case where you want to customize the output and the look of a particular date, and by actually combining these two or 3 of these I would say shortcuts or formula for dates, you can create your own way in which you present dates. So let's say you wanted to present January 2019 as JAN and then 19. You could easily achieve that by just joining 2 of these abbreviation formulas for dates. Last but not least, in tip 22 here on screen, we use the eDate formula. The eDate formula is used to return another date based on the number of months in the future or past. Previously in tip 10 above, we used the EO month formula to return the end of month date from a reference cell. And we learned we could go backwards or forwards. So we used a negative sign to go backwards and a positive integer to go forwards. We used 0 for the current month. The eDate formula is pretty similar, but instead of returning the end of month date, it actually returns the same day of the month, but it'll actually return a different month. For instance, in cell E82, we have date January 21st, 2019 as the reference date. And using the eDate formula and putting a 1 in the formula brings us to the result, which is 1 month later, February 21st, 2019. If we use a -1, it'll bring us back to December 21st, 2019. Therefore, the day of the month does not change, but the month does, and potentially the year if you're hovering over December. At the bottom of the section here, I've included a sample table, which is a great reference point of summarizing some of the formula that we've learned within this lesson. The left side of the table has some reference sample dates. The next column returns the day using the day formula, and then the following column returns the month using the month formula, and then we have a column for the year to return those as well. To the right of that, we use the text formula and return the full name of the day, and then we use the eDate formula to return the prior month date, and in column I, the month ahead. Finally, in column J, we convert the date to a quarter-end reference using the quarterly reference formula we reviewed in tip 11 of this lesson. That pretty much summarizes the key date formula that you should practice and build into your daily financial modeling, analysis, or other Excel work. This will ultimately save you time in the analysis that you perform. Now that we know these formula are available, when you perform your next tasks on a day-to-day basis, you should ask yourself before doing the analysis whether any of these formula are relevant to be used. If the answer is yes, don't be hesitant to start using them. You may not at first feel comfortable with using them, but once you get in the habit and the hang of using them, I can tell you that you probably won't go back to using a manual input method or typing things out manually. Keep this workbook at an accessible area on your computer so that you can pull it open and grab the formulas and make reference to it throughout the day whenever you're trying to streamline your next process and integrate date formula into your Microsoft Excel activities. Hey guys, thanks for watching this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe from you. And if you want to learn more about Microsoft Excel, check out these videos above. And don't forget to check out our website, commercecurve.com, where we have lots of in-depth finance and accounting courses available with full training workbooks. All of our courses come with complete workbooks of lessons, examples, pre-built financial models, and training video. Hope to see you there.